Yields back. Now recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Moskowitz, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment today would prohibit the executive branch from using federal funds to eliminate FEMA, transfer its responsibilities to another agency, or reduce its staffing or funding in a way that impairs its ability to fulfill its statutory functions unless expressly authorized by Congress. In fact, my amendment today just says again what's in the Stafford Act and what's in the Homeland Security Act, which was passed after Katrina. The president was right that FEMA needs reform. Let me say this again. The president was right that FEMA needs reform, as the chairwoman knows from her experiences in North Carolina after Hurricane Helene. But the Secretary of Homeland Security is dead wrong that FEMA should be deleted. First of all, the Secretary is in violation right now of the Stafford Act and in violation of the Homeland Security Act. The Secretary has no ability to pause all grants, which she has done. She has no ability to transfer any of the appropriations or restructure FEMA as she's done. Both of those are in direct violation of the Stafford Act and the Homeland Security Act that was passed after Katrina. So grants are paused. What does that mean, that all grants are paused? That means states right now that are going into hurricane season don't know whether or not they're going to get a declaration, which this administration is holding back. What happens if you don't get a declaration? Just go ask the governor of Arkansas, Governor Huckabee, who worked for the president. It took her weeks to get a declaration. You can't move, you can't respond, you can't spend money because you don't know that you're going to get reimbursed. Fiscally constrained cities and counties don't make decisions. It's analysis paralysis. It's actually in direct contradiction with what we're trying to do. We're trying to speed up FEMA. We're trying to make it faster, right? Which is why I have a bill with Byron Donalds to get FEMA out of Homeland Security. Homeland is disabusing FEMA. They're using FEMA to do grants for the other 22 agencies. That's why we got to get FEMA away from Homeland Security. They're not paying vendors. You know what happens when we don't pay vendors? They can't pay subcontractors. They're not going to be ready to perform in hurricane season. They fired 30% or got them to retire of the workforce in FEMA. Most of the senior people with that experience. You got regional offices in FEMA now that are half empty. By the way, remember that DOGE, remember the E at the end of DOGE, the word efficiency? Nothing at FEMA has been made more efficient. In fact, I would tell you that the Secretary of Homeland Security has turned FEMA into the Newark airport, okay? It is going to fail this summer. And so look, there's no doubt that FEMA needed reform, but what they've done at Homeland is they've taken something that needed help and they broke it further. Do you know what happens if there's no FEMA to the state that the Speaker represents or Steve Scalise represents? Louisiana goes bankrupt without FEMA when there's a hurricane that comes in from the Gulf of Mexico or the Gulf of America, comes right into Louisiana. They're bankrupt. Alabama's bankrupt. Mississippi's bankrupt. You get an F5, F4 tornado in Tornado Alley, those states go bankrupt without FEMA. And yet, I don't see my Republican colleagues calling out the administration on how we're going to save FEMA and reform it. Let me say this. I think the Secretary of Homeland Security has exposed the president in significant ways. And I'm not in the business of protecting the president, but I am in the business of protecting the American people and the country. I don't think the president is aware of the current condition of FEMA and its potential inability to perform. We may get lucky, and hopefully we do. Hopefully we don't have a bad hurricane this season. Hopefully we don't have some unforeseen disaster like an earthquake that hasn't happened since the 90s. Lord knows we had a 1 in 100-year pandemic in the first term of the Trump administration. Hopefully we don't have anything like that, because they have decimated FEMA in ways that we won't know until it happens. And listen, I know the chairwoman represents an area that didn't have the best experience after Helene. There's no question about that. There's dramatic improvement that needs to be done at FEMA. But I'm deeply concerned what's happened at Homeland, and I don't think the president is aware the current condition that the secretary has put him and the men and women that work there and the states that are going to go to FEMA and rely on them to help them in their time of need. And those resources are going to come slower. Think about it. You don't get to move your logistics. You don't get to move your water, your ice, your power generation, any of your stuff. And let me remind you, I did this for a living. For a Republican governor, I worked for Ron DeSantis for 2.5 years, took my political hat off. So I'm not giving you partisan coverage. I'm giving you the current state of affairs in an agency that has been absolutely destroyed. And with that, Madam Chairwoman, I yield back.